The scream echoed through the castle corridors at precisely 3 in the morning, and this time it came from the new chambermaid who'd only started yesterday. Vladimír Drăculești didn't look up from the ancient text spread across his desk when his second-in-command, Lucius, appeared in the doorway of his private study. The vampire king's white hair caught the candlelight, casting shadows across his pale aristocratic features as he turned another page with careful precision. "Let me guess," Vladimir said, his voice carrying the faint accent of centuries spent speaking dozens of languages. "The Eastern Tower again?" "The library this time, my lord." Lucius stepped inside, closing the heavy door behind him. "She claims she saw a woman in white moving between the shelves. Said the figure passed directly through a wall. Did anyone else see this apparition?" "No, sire, but this is the 5th servant in 2 months. They're beginning to talk. Some are requesting transfers to other houses, and recruiting new staff is becoming increasingly difficult." Vladimir finally lifted his gaze from the book, his dark crimson eyes meeting Lucius's silver ones. "I see, and what do they say in the servants' quarters?" "That the castle is haunted, that a young woman died here long ago, cursed to wander these halls for eternity." Lucius paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Some say she's searching for something. Others claim she's a warning." "How dramatic." Vladimir closed the book with a soft thud. "Tell the staff to stop spreading ghost stories and focus on their duties. Dismiss the chambermaid if she cannot handle her position." "My lord, with respect, perhaps we should consider—" "I know exactly who she is, Lucius." The words came out sharper than intended. "And she is not a ghost." Lucius's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. In 300 years of service, he'd learned to school his expressions perfectly. "You know, I have always known." Vladimir stood, his tall frame unfolding with predatory grace. He moved to the window overlooking the castle grounds, the city lights of Prague twinkling in the distance beyond the ancient walls. "She's been here for 4 months now, since the night of the winter solstice. But why would someone be hiding in the castle? How have they evaded our security measures, our sentries, the magical wards?" Lucius stepped closer, genuine concern creasing his features. "If someone has breached our defenses, we need to—" "She's not an intruder in the way you're thinking." Vladimir's reflection in the glass showed a complicated expression, something between frustration and an emotion he refused to name. "She's human, young, frightened, and she has nowhere else to go." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. "You've allowed a human to live secretly in the castle?" Lucius's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "My lord, if the council discovers this, if the other noble houses find out, which is precisely why you're going to ensure the servants stop their hysteria and the rumors don't spread beyond these walls." Vladimir turned, his gaze commanding absolute obedience. "Am I clear?" "Of course, sire." Lucius bowed, but hesitation lingered in his posture. "May I ask why? Why permit her to remain?" Vladimir was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "Because I owe her a debt, and because she would be dead within hours if she left this castle." He dismissed Lucius with a wave of his hand, waiting until the door clicked shut before returning to the window. Somewhere in the vast maze of corridors and chambers she was hiding, watching. Surviving, Felicity Laurent pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her heart still hammering from the close call in the library. She hadn't meant to startle the maid. She'd been so careful, moving only during the day when most of the vampires slept, memorizing patrol patterns, learning which rooms stayed empty and which floorboards creaked. But she'd miscalculated. She'd thought she had more time before the morning cleaning rotation began. The white dress she wore was practical despite its ghostly appearance, stolen from a storage room weeks ago. It allowed her to blend with the pale stone walls and Gothic decor. Her long dark hair she kept braided tightly, tucked away to minimize her silhouette in the shadows. Felicity moved quickly through the hidden servant passages she'd discovered, the ones that let her traverse the castle unseen. Her bare feet made no sound on the stone. She'd abandoned shoes after the first week, when she realized how much noise they made. When she finally reached her sanctuary, a forgotten storage room in the castle's oldest wing, she sagged against the door in relief. The space was small, maybe 10 feet square, filled with dusty furniture covered in sheets. She'd made a nest behind an old wardrobe, complete with blankets stolen from the laundry and a small stash of food she'd carefully pilfered from the kitchens. It wasn't much, but it was better than being dead. Felicity wrapped herself in a blanket and pulled out the photograph she kept tucked in her dress pocket. The image showed a younger version of herself, maybe 17, standing beside a tall man with kind eyes and dark hair threaded with silver. Her father, Professor David Laurent, specialist in medieval history and folklore, the man whose research had gotten him killed 5 months ago. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough. Now she had to survive long enough to figure out what to do next. Her father had been investigating vampire activity in Central Europe, specifically rumors of ancient noble houses that still maintained power in modern society. His work had taken them to Prague, where he'd been convinced the legendary Drăculești line descendants of Vlad Dracula himself still existed and operated in secret. He'd been right, and discovering the truth had cost him everything. Felicity had been there the night the vampires came for him. She'd hidden in the hotel bathroom while they dragged him from their room, his screams cutting off too abruptly. She'd waited until dawn, then fled with nothing but her passport, some cash, and the knowledge that she was next. She'd been running for weeks when she'd stumbled upon the castle. It sat on the outskirts of Prague, hidden behind high walls and ancient magic that kept humans from noticing it unless they knew exactly what to look for. Felicity had only found it because her father had mapped its location before he died. In her desperation, she'd broken in through a damaged section of the outer wall, thinking only that she needed somewhere to hide. Somewhere the vampires who'd killed her father would never think to look. She'd never imagined she would end up living in the home of the vampire king himself. Felicity had learned Vladimír Drăculești's identity by eavesdropping on conversations, by watching from the shadows. She'd seen him in passing, tall, regal, impossibly beautiful in the way vampires were. White hair that fell to his shoulders, skin like marble, eyes the color of blood in candlelight. He moved through the castle like he owned every stone, every breath of air, which she supposed he did. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was hiding in the house of the vampire king while trying to escape his kind. But in 4 months, she'd come to a startling realization. Whoever had killed her father, it hadn't been on Vladimir's orders. She'd listened to enough conversations, witnessed enough politics and council meetings from her hidden vantage points. The vampire world was fractured into noble houses, each with their own territories and agendas. Vladimir was powerful, ancient, respected, but he was also careful about maintaining order and following the old laws. One of those laws, she'd learned, was that humans under scholarly protection were not to be touched. Researchers who signed treaties with the Vampire Council were granted safe passage to study and document in exchange for keeping vampire secrets. Her father had signed such a treaty. His death had been a violation of vampire law, which meant someone in the vampire world had committed murder and broken their own sacred rules. Someone who didn't want the information her father had discovered to become known. Felicity pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She'd been gathering information, piecing together what she could from overheard conversations, but she was running out of time. The servants were getting spooked, and she'd noticed increased security patrols in recent weeks. Sooner or later, someone would find her, and then what? 3 nights later, Vladimir stood in the Grand Council chamber facing 5 of the most powerful vampires in Europe. The room was designed to intimidate, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow, walls lined with portraits of ancestors long dead. A massive table carved from a single piece of black oak. Lady Elisabetta Bathory, descended from the infamous countess herself, sat to his right. Her white hair was coiled in an elaborate style, her blood-red gown a statement of power. Beside her, Lord Konstantin Draven watched with predatory interest, his silver eyes missing nothing. Lord Nikolai Romanov represented the Eastern Territories, his bearing still carrying the imperial arrogance of his mortal lineage. Lady Serafina Corvinus controlled the southern regions, her delicate features hiding a ruthlessly cunning mind. And finally, Lord Marius Venturi, who'd consolidated power in the Western Territories through strategic alliances and carefully executed betrayals. The situation in Berlin requires immediate attention, Elisabetta was saying. The younger vampires are becoming reckless, feeding indiscriminately. If we don't intervene, then let them face the consequences, Marius interrupted. We've coddled the new generations long enough. Perhaps a few executions would remind them why we have rules. Mass executions would draw human attention, Vladimir said calmly, which defeats the entire purpose of our discretion. Then what do you suggest, my lord? Konstantin leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk playing at his lips. Another stern warning? More slaps on the wrist? I suggest we send experienced enforcers to establish order and educate those who've forgotten why we maintain the old ways. Vladimir met Konstantin's gaze without flinching. Violence is sometimes necessary, but it should never be our first option. How very modern of you, Konstantin said, his tone mocking. Tell me, has living among humans for so long made you soft? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Vladimir's expression didn't change, but power radiated from him in waves that made even the elder vampires straighten in their seats. Careful, Konstantin. Your tongue moves faster than your wisdom. Konstantin had enough sense to back down. Though resentment flickered in his eyes, the meeting continued for another hour, covering territory disputes, blood supply management, and the delicate balance of maintaining secrecy in an age of surveillance technology. By the time the council adjourned, Vladimir was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. He returned to his private chambers, dismissing his guards with instructions not to be disturbed. The rooms were lavish centuries of collected art and artifacts, furniture that had belonged to kings, windows overlooking the Prague skyline. But luxury meant little when you'd lived as long as he had. Vladimir poured himself a glass of blood wine, a blend that satisfied thirst while providing the subtle complexity of aged vintage. He was halfway through the glass when he sensed movement in the shadows of his study. "You can come out," he said without turning around. "I know you're there." The silence stretched so long he began to think she'd fled. Then slowly a figure emerged from behind the heavy curtains near the bookshelf. Felicity Laurent looked like a ghost in her white dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders for once. But her eyes were very much alive, wide, frightened, defiant. She kept her distance, poised to run. "How long have you known?" Her voice was soft but steady. "Since the first night you entered my castle." Vladimir set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "Did you truly think you could breach centuries-old wards without my knowledge? Then why didn't you?" She trailed off, confusion and fear warring in her expression. "Why didn't I have you killed? Captured? Thrown out?" He moved slowly, carefully, the way one might approach a frightened animal. "Because I know who you are, Felicity Laurent. I know what happened to your father, and I know you're innocent of any crime that would warrant harm." She flinched at his use of her name, taking a step back. "Stay away from me. I have no intention of hurting you." Vladimir kept his distance, showing his palms in a gesture of peace. "If I did, you would have been dead months ago. You're a vampire, one of them. How can I trust anything you say?" "You can't," he admitted. "But consider this, you've been living in my home for 4 months. You've stolen food, supplies, clothing. You've moved freely through spaces I could have easily barred to you. If I wanted you dead, would I have allowed any of that?" Felicity's jaw tightened. "Maybe you're playing with me. Cats play with mice before they kill them. I am many things, Miss Laurent, but I am not cruel for cruelty's sake." Vladimir moved to a chair and sat, deliberately making himself less threatening. "Your father was David Laurent, professor of medieval history. He signed a treaty with the Vampire Council 18 months ago, granting him protected status to research our history. 5 months ago he was murdered in direct violation of that treaty." Her breath caught. "You know about the treaty? I oversaw its signing personally. Your father was a brilliant man, thorough in his research, respectful in his approach. His death was both a tragedy and a crime under our most sacred laws." "Then who killed him?" The question burst from her like a dam breaking. "Why, and why haven't you done anything about it?" "Because I didn't know he was dead until you appeared in my castle." Vladimir's expression darkened. His murder was concealed from the council, covered up so thoroughly that no word reached official channels. Someone with significant power and resources wanted him dead and the crime hidden. Felicity wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. "They killed him right in front of me. I heard everything. And then they started looking for me. Said I'd seen too much, knew too much." "What did you see?" 3 vampires. I never saw their faces clearly, but I heard them talking. They kept saying something about the bloodline proof and how my father had gotten too close to discovering the truth about Prague." She looked up at him, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What does that mean? What was he about to discover?" Vladimir was silent for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. "I don't know. But if you're willing to trust me even slightly, I give you my word that I will find out, and I will see justice done for your father." "Your word?" She laughed bitterly. "What good is a vampire's word? Among my kind, a word given is a bond sealed in blood and honor. To break it would be to lose everything: status, power, respect." He met her gaze steadily. "I swear on my name and my bloodline that I will protect you, discover the truth about your father's death, and ensure those responsible face consequences. This I vow, Felicity Laurent." The air between them seemed to shimmer with the weight of the oath. Felicity felt it somehow, an invisible thread connecting them. She didn't understand it, but she knew instinctively that he'd just bound himself to a promise he couldn't break. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because your father deserved the protection he was promised, because you deserve justice, and because no one violates the law in my territory and walks away unpunished." His eyes flashed with something dangerous. "I am many things, Miss Laurent, but I am first and always a king, and kings do not tolerate treason." Felicity felt her legs give out. She sank to the floor, all the fear and exhaustion of the past months crashing over her at once. She'd been so scared, so alone, running on nothing but adrenaline and desperation. Vladimir moved before she fully registered it, crossing the space between them with inhuman speed. But he didn't touch her, just knelt nearby, close enough to catch her if she fell but far enough to give her space. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" he asked quietly. "I don't. Yesterday, the day before?" She couldn't remember. Time had become strange, measured in survival rather than days. "Come," he stood, offering his hand. "You need food, rest, and safety. I can provide all three." She stared at his outstretched hand, pale, elegant, deadly. Everything in her screamed not to trust him. But she was so tired of being afraid, of hiding, of living like a ghost in the shadows. Slowly she placed her hand in his. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip gentle but unbreakable. He helped her to her feet with effortless strength, steadying her when she swayed. "I'm going to take you to a safe room," Vladimir said. "One of the guest chambers in my private wing. No one enters these rooms without my explicit permission. You'll have privacy, security, and everything you need. And if I want to leave, then you leave. But I would strongly advise against it until we know who killed your father and whether they're still searching for you." His expression turned grim. "Prague is not safe for you, Miss Laurent. Not yet." He led her through the castle, moving through corridors she'd never dared explore. The private wing was even more opulent than the rest of the castle, thick carpets muffling their footsteps, artwork worth fortunes hanging casually on walls, windows overlooking the city that probably cost more than most houses. The guest room he showed her to was larger than the entire hotel room she'd shared with her father. A massive four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in midnight blue silk. A fireplace carved with intricate designs sat cold but ready to be lit. French doors opened onto a private balcony, though Vladimir made a point of showing her how to secure them from the inside. "There's a bathroom through that door, fully stocked. The wardrobe has clothing that should fit you. I'll have more suitable things brought tomorrow." He moved to a panel in the wall, revealing a small refrigerator. "Human food. I keep these rooms prepared for the rare occasions when I host mortal guests." "You do that often?" She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "More often than you'd think. Diplomats, researchers under treaty, occasional human allies." He closed the panel. "We're not the monsters your stories paint us as, Miss Laurent. Most of us, anyway. Most isn't all." "No," he agreed. "Which is why you'll stay here, where I can ensure your safety." There was a soft knock at the door. Vladimir opened it to reveal Lucius carrying a silver tray laden with food, bread, cheese, fruit, what looked like soup in a covered bowl. "I thought the young lady might be hungry," Lucius said, his expression carefully neutral as he took in Felicity's appearance. "My lord." "Thank you, Lucius. This is Miss Felicity Laurent. She's under my direct protection as of this moment. Inform the household that she is to be treated as an honored guest, and any threat to her well-being will be considered a threat to me personally." Lucia's eyes widened fractionally. "Of course, sire. I'll spread the word immediately." After he left, Vladimir gestured to the table where Lucius had set the tray. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow we'll begin investigating your father's death properly." "Just like that?" Felicity moved to the table, her stomach growling at the sight of real food. "You expect me to just trust you? Sleep here? Act like I'm a guest instead of a prisoner? You're not a prisoner. The door won't be locked. You're free to roam the castle if you wish, though I'd advise staying within the private wing for now." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I understand your distrust. I've lived long enough to know that trust must be earned, not demanded. So I'll earn it, Miss Laurent. Day by day, action by action, until you believe that I mean what I say. And if I never trust you, then at least you'll be alive and safe while not trusting me." A hint of something that might have been a smile crossed his features. "I've been called worse things than untrustworthy." He left before she could respond, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Felicity stood frozen for a long moment, half convinced this was some elaborate trap. But the food was real, the room was real, and the exhaustion dragging at her bones was definitely real. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the food despite its quality. Her mind kept spinning, trying to process everything that had happened. The Vampire King knew who she was. He'd known all along. He'd just promised to help her. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. But as she finally crawled into the impossibly soft bed, pulling the silk sheets up to her chin, Felicity realized something stunning. For the first time in 5 months, she felt almost safe. The next morning, or what passed for morning in a castle full of vampires, Felicity woke to find a selection of clothes laid out in the wardrobe. Jeans, sweaters, dresses, all in her size. Someone had even included shoes, underwear, basic toiletries. She showered for the first time in months with actual hot water and proper soap, almost crying at the simple luxury of feeling clean. The bathroom mirror showed a stranger's face thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes and cheekbones more prominent than she remembered. She looked like a ghost even without the white dress. Felicity dressed in jeans and a soft gray sweater, braiding her hair out of habit. She had no idea what to do now. Wait for Vladimir, explore, try to leave? The decision was made for her when someone knocked softly at the door. Miss Laurent? A woman's voice, cautious. My Lord Vladimir requests your presence in his study if you're willing. Felicity opened the door to find a vampire woman in elegant modern clothing, black slacks and a white blouse, her white hair cut in a sleek bob. Her red eyes were curious but not hostile. I'm Svetlana, the woman said. I serve as his lordship's personal assistant. I'm to escort you if you'll follow me. The study was in the highest tower, accessed by a winding stone staircase that made Felicity's legs burn. Svetlana knocked once, then opened the door at Vladimir's called permission. The room was circular, windows on all sides providing panoramic views of Prague. Books lined every available wall space, ancient tomes mixed with modern volumes. A massive desk sat in the center, covered in papers, maps, and what looked like old photographs. Vladimir stood by one of the windows, backlit by the gray morning light filtering through heavy curtains. He turned when they entered, and Felicity was struck again by how otherworldly he looked. Too pale, too perfect, too still. Nothing about him read as human. Thank you, Svetlana, that will be all. He waited until she'd left before gesturing to a chair near the desk. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Felicity sat, trying to calm her racing heart. In the daylight such as it was, she could see him more clearly. He wore modern clothes, black slacks, and a deep burgundy shirt, but somehow made them look regal. His white hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. I spent the night reviewing your father's research, Vladimir said, moving to the desk. He submitted regular reports to the council as required by his treaty. His most recent reports focused on bloodline documentation and the historical records of vampire noble houses in Prague. He was trying to trace the lineages, Felicity said softly. He believed there were inconsistencies in the historical record, gaps that didn't make sense, and he was right. Vladimir pulled out a leather journal, old and worn. This was your father's. I had it retrieved from his hotel room after his death was finally reported officially. They claimed it was a robbery gone wrong. Felicity reached for the journal with shaking hands. Her father's handwriting covered the pages, familiar loops and angles that made her chest ache. How did you get this? I have resources. When I learned of your presence here, I made inquiries. This was being held in evidence by the Vampire Investigation Unit. His expression darkened. Evidence that was never going to see a courtroom, I suspect. She flipped through the pages, scanning her father's notes. Most of it was documentation. She recognized bloodline charts, historical dates, cross-references to castle records. But toward the end, the writing became more urgent, more scattered. The Drăculești line shows two distinct branches, she read aloud. Official records claim the secondary branch died out in 1672, but evidence suggests otherwise. Property deeds, witness accounts, even artwork from the period all point to survival. Why was this hidden? Who benefits? Keep reading, Vladimir said quietly. Her eyes moved down the page. Met with contact tonight. Claims to have proof of living heir from secondary branch. If true, this changes everything about Prague power structure. Meeting again tomorrow to verify documents. That was the last entry. Dated the night before her father died. Someone didn't want him to verify those documents, Felicity whispered. Someone killed him to keep this secret, not just someone. Someone with enough power to organize a murder, conceal it from the council, and confiscate evidence. Vladimir leaned against the desk. The question is who, and more importantly, why does the existence of a secondary Drăculești heir matter so much? You're Drăculești. Don't you know your own family history? I know the official history. I know what the records show. His jaw tightened. But I also know that history is written by victors, and records can be altered by those with motivation and power. So there might actually be another heir? Someone with a claim to power, to territory, to wealth accumulated over centuries. Vladimir moved to one of the windows, staring out at the city. The Drăculești line has ruled Prague and the surrounding territories for nearly 500 years. If another heir exists, one with legitimate claim, it could spark a succession war that would tear apart everything we've built. Would you kill to keep your power? The question came out before she could stop it. He looked at her over his shoulder, something unreadable in his eyes. Once, perhaps. When I was younger, more arrogant, more concerned with status than justice. He turned fully. But I've lived a long time, Miss Laurent, long enough to understand that power built on lies and murder is worthless, long enough to be very, very tired. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Your father was killed to conceal the truth, Vladimir continued. Which means the truth is dangerous to someone. We need to find out what he discovered and who he met with. Then we'll know who murdered him. How do we do that? We retrace his steps, we find his contact, and we make them tell us everything. His expression turned cold, predatory. I can be very persuasive when necessary. Over the following days, Felicity found herself drawn into a world she'd only glimpsed from the shadows. Vladimir's household was a complex operations and dozens of vampires and human staff working in careful coordination. The humans were paid well, treated respectfully, and protected by strict laws against feeding on employees. "We're not savages," Lucius explained when Felicity expressed surprise. His lordship has always maintained that willing donors and synthetic blood sources are both more ethical and more practical than hunting. She spent hours with Vladimir, going through her father's research, comparing it to castle records and historical documents. He was patient, explaining vampire politics and history, never making her feel stupid for not understanding. "The noble houses operate like a feudal system," he said one evening, spreading a map across his desk. "Each house controls territory, with smaller houses swearing fealty to larger ones. The Drăculești, Corvinus, Bathory, Romanov, and Venturi houses are the 5 great powers, but dozens of lesser houses exist beneath them. And everyone just accepts this? In the modern world? We've adapted. Most of our businesses are legitimate now: real estate, technology, banking. But the old structures remain underneath." He traced a line on the map. "Your father was investigating property records. If the secondary branch survived, they would have needed resources, safe houses, documentation. So we look for properties connected to Drăculești but not officially recorded." "Exactly. They worked together late into the nights, Vladimir seeming to forget she was human, that she needed sleep and regular meals." Felicity found herself forgetting too, caught up in the puzzle her father had died solving. She also found herself watching Vladimir when he didn't notice. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the way candlelight caught in his white hair, the rare moments when he smiled at something in an old text. He was beautiful in an unsettling way, but also lonely. She recognized that loneliness because she carried it too. "Tell me about him," Vladimir said one night, surprising her. "Your father, what was he like?" Felicity looked up from the document she'd been reading. "He was brilliant, kind. He'd get so excited about his research he'd forget to eat, forget to sleep." She smiled despite the pain. "He believed that understanding the past was the key to building a better future. That's why he wanted to study vampires, not to expose you, but to document your history before it was lost. He succeeded. His work was remarkable." Vladimir's expression softened. "I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry I couldn't prevent it. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He died in my territory, supposedly under my protection. That makes it my responsibility." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire Vladimir kept burning for her benefit. "What about you?" Felicity asked. "What were you like as a human? Do you even remember?" "I remember." He was quiet for a long moment. "I was the 3rd son of a minor noble family, which meant I inherited nothing and had few prospects. I was angry about that, desperate to prove myself." His laugh was bitter. "I got my wish. A vampire turned me when I was 23, thinking to use me as a pawn in political games. Instead, I survived long enough to outlive everyone who underestimated me." "Do you regret it, becoming a vampire?" "Sometimes. Mostly I regret the people I hurt becoming the man, the creature I am now." He met her eyes. "Immortality sounds appealing until you realize everyone you love will die while you remain. Until you've attended so many funerals you stop letting yourself care. Is that why you live alone, keep people at a distance?" "I'm not alone. I have my household, my responsibilities. That's not the same as having people who know you, really know you." Vladimir's expression closed off. "This is an inappropriate conversation." "Why?" "Because I'm human. Because you're supposed to be above mortal concerns. Because you're my guest and under my protection. Because certain boundaries exist for good reason." He stood abruptly. "It's late, you should rest." Felicity recognized the dismissal but felt a spark of defiance. "You said you'd earn my trust." "Trust goes both ways, Your Majesty." She left before he could respond, but she felt his gaze on her back all the way to the door. The breakthrough came a week later. Felicity had been searching through property records, cross-referencing names and dates, when she founded a small estate on the outskirts of Prague, purchased in 1673, and held under a shell company that had changed names a dozen times over the centuries. But the original deed showed a signature, Vladimír Drăculești. "That's not possible," Vladimir said when she showed him. "Vasil was my younger brother. He died in 1672 of fever." "Are you sure? Did you see the body?" He faltered. "No, I was away, campaigning with the army. By the time I returned he'd been buried for weeks. What if he didn't die? What if he was turned like you?" Vladimir stared at the document, his expression unreadable. If Vasil survived, if he became a vampire, why wouldn't he have contacted me? Why hide for centuries? Maybe he couldn't, maybe someone prevented it. Felicity pulled out another document. Look at this, an expenditure record from your castle accounts in 1674. A large sum paid to Lord Constantin Draven for services rendered. And here, another payment the following year, and another, Constantin. Vladimir's voice turned deadly soft. He was on the council even then, one of the oldest, most powerful vampires in Europe. Your father's notes mentioned Constantin too. He wrote that Constantin seemed unusually interested in bloodline documentation, kept asking questions about succession laws. The pieces clicked together with awful clarity. If Vasil had survived, if someone had turned him and then hidden him away, if that someone was Constantin Draven, then Constantin had been sitting on a secret for 3.5 centuries. A secret that could destroy his political standing if revealed. We need to find that estate, Vladimir said. If Vasil is alive, if he's been hidden all this time, then Constantin had my father killed to keep anyone from discovering the truth. Felicity finished. And he'll kill again to protect it. Vladimir's eyes met hers, fierce and determined. We have to move carefully. Constantin is dangerous and he has allies. When do we go? We don't. I'll take Lucius and no. Felicity stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. My father died for this. I'm seeing it through. Absolutely not. You're human, vulnerable, and I'm the only one who's read all of my father's research, who knows what he was thinking, what he might have discovered. She crossed her arms. Besides, you swore to protect me. That's easier to do if I'm with you rather than here where Constantin could send someone while you're gone. Vladimir looked like he wanted to argue, but she could see him working through the logic. Finally, he sighed. You stay close to me at all times. You follow my orders without question, and at the first sign of danger you run. Agreed? Agreed. They left that night, taking Vladimir's car, a sleek black luxury vehicle that probably cost more than a house, and driving through Prague's darkened streets. Felicity had rarely left the castle in months, and seeing the city slide past felt surreal. Tell me about Constantin, she said as they drove. What is he like? Ruthless, patient. He's played the long game for centuries, accumulating power through careful alliances and strategic manipulation. Vladimir's hands tightened on the steering wheel. If he's behind this, he'll have contingencies, protections, ways to deflect blame. Can you beat him? In a fight? Probably. I'm older in vampire years and power grows with age. But Constantin has numbers, vampires loyal to him, resources, influence. He glanced at her. This could turn into war, Felicity. The kind of war that burns cities and kills thousands. Then we make sure we have proof. Evidence even his allies can't ignore. The estate sat behind high walls, isolated from its neighbors. It looked abandoned, the gardens overgrown, the windows dark, the gate rusted. But Vladimir's expression was tense as they approached. Someone's here, he said quietly. I can feel it. Is it Constantin? No, someone else. He parked the car down the road, hidden in shadows. Remember what I said. Stay close, stay quiet, and run if I tell you to. They approached on foot, Vladimir moving with predatory silence. He scaled the wall effortlessly, then reached down to lift Felicity up as if she weighed nothing. His hands were cool through her jacket, his strength inhuman and somehow reassuring. The grounds were eerily silent. No animals, no wind, just oppressive stillness. Vladimir led her toward the main house, his eyes scanning constantly. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was furnished but dusty, as if someone lived here but barely. Vladimir moved through rooms with purpose, clearly following some sense Felicity didn't possess. They found him in the library. The vampire sat in a chair by a cold fireplace, so still he might have been a statue. White hair hung lank around his face, his pale skin stretched tight over bones. He wore clothes from another century, faded and moth-eaten. When he looked up at their entrance, his eyes were the same dark crimson as Vladimir's. Brother, the vampire whispered. Vladimir froze, his entire body rigid with shock. Vasil? You found me. Vasil's laugh was broken, painful. After all these years, you finally found me. Felicity watched as Vladimir crossed the room slowly, as if afraid his brother might disappear. I thought you were dead. I mourned you for centuries. How? How is this possible? Constantin. The name came out as a curse. He found me dying of fever, offered to save me, to give me eternal life. I was young, frightened, desperate. I said yes. Vasil's hands trembled. I didn't know the price. Didn't know he'd keep me here imprisoned for 350 years. Imprisoned? Vladimir knelt before his brother's chair. Why? For what purpose? Leverage, insurance. He said that as long as he held me, he held power over you. That if you ever moved against him, he'd kill me. But he also knew that if you discovered I was alive, you'd stop at nothing to free me. Vasil's eyes filled with red tears. So he kept me hidden, let you believe I was dead. and I was too weak, too controlled to escape or even call out the researcher, Felicity said softly. My father, he found records proving Vasil survived. He was going to expose the truth. Vasil looked at her for the first time. David Laurent. Yes, he came here. I managed to give him documents. Proof of what Konstantin had done. I thought finally someone would tell Vladimir they killed him, Felicity said, her voice breaking. Konstantin had him murdered to keep the secret. I'm sorry. Vasil's whisper was agonized. I'm so sorry. I never wanted anyone to die because of me. Vladimir's face was a mask of fury and grief. I will destroy him. I will burn his house to the ground and scatter his ashes to the wind. No. Vasil gripped his brother's arm with surprising strength. You have to be smart. Konstantin has allies, power, plans within plans. If you move against him openly, he'll take you down with him. You need proof, allies of your own, an airtight case that even the council can't ignore. We have proof, Felicity said. My father's research, the documents, and now Vasil himself as witness. It's enough, Vladimir said, standing. More than enough. We'll bring this before the full council, force a formal investigation. He'll fight, Vasil warned. He'll use every weapon at his disposal. Let him try. Vladimir helped his brother to his feet. We're leaving now. You're coming with me, back to the castle where you should have been all along. They made it to the car before Konstantin's vampires found them. 6 of them melted out of the shadows, moving with lethal precision. Vladimir pushed Felicity behind him, his body a wall between her and danger. Lord Vladimir, the lead vampire said, his tone mockingly polite. Lord Konstantin sends his regards. He respectfully requests that you return his property and forget you were ever here. His property? Vladimir's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. You mean my brother? The vampire who was imprisoned against his will for centuries? Semantics. Lord Konstantin has legal claim. He has nothing. Vladimir's power rolled out in waves that made even the attacking vampires flinch. And you have one chance to leave before I demonstrate exactly why I've ruled Prague for 500 years. The lead vampire hesitated, clearly uncertain. Then one of his companions lunged. What followed was too fast for Felicity's human eyes to fully follow. Vladimir moved like lightning, like death given form. He was brutal and efficient, centuries of combat experience evident in every move. Within seconds, 3 vampires were down, injured or dead. The remaining 3 backed away, fear finally overriding orders. Tell Konstantin I'm coming for him, Vladimir said softly. Tell him the truth is known, and there is no hiding anymore. Tell him to prepare for judgment. They fled. Vladimir turned to check on Vasil and Felicity, blood staining his clothes and hands. He looked terrifying, inhuman, every inch the predator. But when his eyes found Felicity, they softened with concern. Are you hurt? She shook her head mutely, too shocked to speak. She'd known intellectually that he was dangerous, but seeing it was different. Seeing the violence he was capable of, when threatened, made her realize exactly what kind of creature had sworn to protect her. The drive back to the castle was tense. Vasil sat in the back seat, looking out the window at a world that had changed beyond recognition during his imprisonment. Felicity kept stealing glances at Vladimir, whose jaw was set in grim determination. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. I tried to avoid violence, but you protected us. I understand. She did, surprisingly. What happens now? Now we prepare for war. His hands tightened on the wheel. Konstantin won't go quietly. He'll try to turn the council against me, to paint Vasil's rescue as an act of aggression. Then we tell the truth. Make sure everyone knows what he did. Truth doesn't always win against power. But we'll try. Back at the castle, Vladimir installed Vasil in guest chambers and called an emergency council meeting. Word spread quickly through vampire society the king had found his supposedly dead brother, imprisoned by Konstantin Draven for centuries. The council convened within 48 hours, every major house sending representatives. The tension in the chamber was explosive. Konstantin arrived with his full retinue, his expression carefully neutral. But Felicity, watching from the gallery where Vladimir had reluctantly allowed her to sit, could see the calculation in his eyes. This council recognizes Lord Vladimír Drăculești, Lady Elisabetta announced. State your grievance. Vladimir stood, his presence commanding absolute attention. I accuse Lord Konstantin Draven of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder in violation of our most sacred laws. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Konstantin remained seated, a slight smile playing at his lips. These are serious accusations, Lord Nikolai said. What evidence do you present? My brother Vasil Drăculești, whom this council believed dead for 350 years. Vladimir gestured and Vasil entered the chamber, still weak but standing tall, held prisoner by Konstantin to be used as leverage against me. More murmurs, louder now. Several council members looked genuinely shocked. I also present documentation proving Konstantin paid large sums to conceal Vasil's survival, Vladimir continued, and evidence connecting him to the murder of Professor David Laurent, a human researcher under treaty protection. These are lies. Konstantin stood, his voice ringing with indignation. Fabrications designed to discredit me. Vasil chose to live in isolation. I merely provided him sanctuary. Sanctuary? Vasil's voice, though weak, carried. You bound me with blood magic. Threatened to kill my brother if I revealed myself. Held me prisoner for centuries while pretending friendship to Vladimir. Prove it. Konstantin challenged. Where is your evidence? Your witnesses? Felicity stood before she realized what she was doing. I'm a witness. All eyes turned to her. Vladimir's expression flashed with alarm, but she continued before he could stop her. My father was Professor David Laurent. He discovered the truth about Vasil. He met with Vasil, obtained documents proving everything. She descended from the gallery, her voice growing stronger. 3 vampires came to our hotel room 5 months ago. They killed my father in front of me. And before they did, I heard them talking about how Konstantin Draven had ordered it, how my father had gotten too close to the truth. The testimony of a human. Konstantin scoffed. Worthless. The testimony of a human under treaty protection whose murder you ordered, Vladimir said coldly. Which is itself a capital crime under our law. Even if I believe these accusations, which I don't, you have no proof it was my order, Konstantin said. Then let's ask your assassins. Vladimir nodded to Lucius, who entered with 3 vampires in chains. We found these 3 still watching the estate. Under questioning, they confessed to murdering Professor Laurent on your orders. Konstantin's mask finally cracked, fury flashing across his features. You dare bring accused criminals before this council without proper trial? I dare bring murderers to justice, Vladimir shot back. The same justice you denied David Laurent, denied Vasil, denied me when you stole my brother, and let me grieve for centuries. The chamber fell silent. Finally, Lady Serafina spoke. These accusations are damning. If proven, they warrant the highest punishment. Then investigate, Vladimir said. Question the prisoners, examine the evidence, see the records for yourselves. But do it quickly, because Konstantin has shown he's willing to kill to keep his secrets. The council debated for hours. Felicity sat beside Vasil, watching the political maneuvering. Some council members were clearly Konstantin's allies, working to cast doubt on the evidence. But others, shocked by the accusations, demanded a full investigation. Finally, as dawn approached, Lady Elisabetta called for a vote. All in favor of a formal investigation into Lord Konstantin Draven's actions, with full council authority to examine evidence and question witnesses? The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Konstantin's closest allies abstained. It is ordered, Elisabetta declared. Lord Konstantin, you are confined to your residence until the investigation concludes. Your assets are frozen, your movements restricted. Konstantin's expression was murderous, but he bowed stiffly. As the council commands. As the meeting adjourned, he passed close to Vladimir, lowering his voice so only those with vampire hearing could catch the words. This isn't over. You've made an enemy you'll regret. I've had you as an enemy for 3 centuries, Vladimir replied quietly. I just didn't know it. The investigation took weeks. Vampires and humans alike were questioned. Documents were examined, cross-referenced, verified. Felicity gave her testimony multiple times, each session more exhausting than the last. But she persisted, determined to see justice for her father. Through it all, Vladimir was a constant presence. He attended every hearing, challenged every attempt to dismiss evidence, and used every ounce of his political power to ensure the truth came out. Felicity found herself spending more time with him, not just discussing the case but talking about everything else. He told her about vampire history, about the world before modern technology, about the strange experience of watching centuries pass. She told him about her childhood, her dreams, her father's passion for knowledge that had ultimately killed him. He would have liked you, she said one evening as they sat in his study. He believed vampires were people, not monsters. You prove him right. I'm not sure I deserve that assessment. Vladimir stared into his wine glass. I've done monstrous things, Felicity. I've killed, manipulated, destroyed anyone who stood in my way. The man I was in my first centuries was not someone your father would have liked. But you changed. That matters, does it? Does change erase centuries of blood? Maybe not erase, but it means something. She reached out hesitantly, placing her hand over his on the desk. His skin was cool under her fingers. You're trying to do right now. You're seeking justice for my father, for Vasil, for everyone Konstantin hurt. That has to count. Vladimir looked at their joined hands, something vulnerable crossing his features. You should hate me, fear me at minimum. I'm a vampire, one of the creatures who killed your father. Konstantin's vampires killed my father. You're trying to make them pay for it. She squeezed his hand gently. I don't hate you, Vladimir. I don't know exactly what I feel, but it's not hate. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture felt intimate, significant. This is unwise, you're human. I'm not. We exist in different worlds. Your brother was human once, so were you. That was a long time ago. Does it matter? She's met his eyes, seeing the conflict there. Maybe I'm being stupid. Maybe this is Stockholm Syndrome or gratitude or just being so tired of being alone. But when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. And I think maybe you feel something too. I do. The admission seemed torn from him. I feel entirely too much, which is precisely the problem. You deserve a normal life, Felicity. A human life with sunlight and simple joys and someone who ages alongside you. That's not your choice to make for me. No, he agreed. But I can choose not to be selfish. I can choose not to damn you to a half-life in shadows because I'm lonely. Before she could respond, Lucius knocked urgently at the door. My lord, the council has reached a verdict. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Every major house had sent representatives, and even minor houses had observers present. This wasn't just about Constantin anymore, it was about whether vampire law meant anything, whether even the most powerful had to answer for their crimes. Lady Elisabetta stood, her expression grave. This council has reviewed all evidence presented in the matter of Lord Constantin Draven. We have heard testimony from witnesses, examined documentation, and consulted with our eldest members on questions of law. The chamber fell completely silent. We find the accusations credible and supported by overwhelming evidence. Lord Constantin Draven is guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of sacred treaty law. Elisabetta's voice rang out clearly. For these crimes, the sentence is death and dissolution of his house. Chaos erupted. Constantin's allies shouted protests while others called for immediate execution. Through it all, Constantin himself sat motionless, his expression blank. Then he moved. It happened too fast for human eyes. Constantin lunged not for the council, not for Vladimir, but for the gallery where Felicity sat. He'd clearly calculated that his only leverage now was a hostage, someone Vladimir cared about, but Vladimir was faster. He intercepted Constantin mid-leap, the two ancient vampires colliding with bone-shattering force. They moved in a blur of violence too quick for Felicity to follow. She heard the sound of impacts, smelled blood, saw flashes of white hair and torn clothing. When they finally separated, both were bleeding. But Constantin was down on one knee, Vladimir standing over him with a broken chair leg pressed to his throat like a stake. It's over, Vladimir said quietly. Accept your sentence with whatever dignity you have left. Constantin laughed, the sound wet and broken. Dignity from the vampire who falls in love with a human, who softens himself for a mortal girl. He spat blood. You've already lost, Vladimir. She'll die in a blink and you'll be alone again, just like I'll soon be dead. We're both doomed, perhaps, Vladimir said. But at least I'll have loved. At least I'll have tried to be better than my nature. Can you say the same? He drove the stake through Constantin's heart in one smooth motion. The ancient vampire crumbled to ash. Centuries of existence ending in seconds, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Lady Elisabetta spoke. Justice is served. Let it be recorded that vampire law applies to all, regardless of rank or power. The council adjourned quickly after that. Vampires dispersed to their territories, carrying news of Constantin's fall. The political landscape had shifted dramatically. Power vacuums would need to be filled, alliances redrawn. But Felicity barely noticed any of that. She descended from the gallery and went straight to Vladimir, who stood covered in blood and ash, looking exhausted in a way she'd never seen. Are you hurt? She asked. I'll heal. He touched her face gently, as if reassuring himself she was real. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm not. I'm glad he's gone. Glad he can't hurt anyone else. She leaned into his touch. What he said about you and me, he was trying to wound me with his last breath. Don't give his words power. But he was right, wasn't he? You do care about me. Vladimir's hand dropped. Felicity, don't. She caught his hand, holding tight. Don't tell me it's impossible or unwise or that I deserve better. Tell me the truth. Do you care about me? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then yes, more than I should, more than is safe for either of us. Then that's enough. She stood on her toes, bringing her face close to his. That's enough to start with. He kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning. His lips were cool against hers, gentle despite the violence he was capable of. One hand came up to cradle the back of her head while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. Felicity melted into him, all the fear and tension of the past months flowing out in this moment of connection. He tasted like blood and wine, like danger and safety all at once. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless and he was looking at her with wonder. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I've had lovers, but never this, never someone I actually care about living or dying. We'll figure it out. She smiled. I'm pretty good at figuring things out. Over the following months they did figure it out. Slowly, carefully, learning each other's boundaries and needs. Vladimir was protective to the point of being overbearing, but Felicity learned how to push back without pushing away. She was impulsive and curious, which terrified him, but he learned to trust that she could handle herself. Vasil recovered slowly, regaining strength as he adjusted to freedom after centuries of imprisonment. He and Vladimir spent hours talking, rebuilding a relationship that had been stolen from them. Watching them together, seeing Vladimir's joy at having his brother back, made Felicity's heart ache in the best way. She officially moved into the castle, taking rooms in the private wing near Vladimir's chambers. The servants who'd once feared her as a ghost accepted her as their lord's lady, treating her with respect and warmth. She even became friends with Svetlana, who taught her the intricacies of vampire politics. You're good for him, Svetlana said one afternoon as they took tea together. I've served Lord Vladimir for 200 years and I've never seen him this human. Is that good or bad? It's good. It means he's remembering what it's like to live instead of just exist. Svetlana smiled. Don't tell him I said this, but he's been lonely for so long. I'm glad he found you. The question of Felicity's mortality hung between them, unspoken but always present. Vladimir refused to discuss turning her, insisted she needed to live a full human life first. But Felicity saw how he watched her sometimes, something desperate and sad in his eyes, as if he was memorizing every moment. 6 months after Konstantin's death, on a spring evening with Prague's lights twinkling outside the windows, Felicity finally brought it up. I want to talk about the future, she said. They were in his study, her favorite place in the castle. Vladimir looked up from the book he'd been reading, immediately alert. What about it? About us. About what happens when I get older and you don't. His jaw tightened. Felicity, please just listen. She moved to sit beside him. I know you think I should live a normal human life. I know you're trying to protect me from making a choice you think I'll regret, but you're not listening to what I actually want. What you want now and what you'll want in 10, 20, 50 years are different things. Maybe, but maybe not. She took his hand. I love you, Vladimir. I love this life we're building. I love waking up in a castle, learning about vampire politics, helping you navigate council meetings. I love your brother and your household and this strange, beautiful world you've shown me. You're 23 years old. You've barely lived. I've lived plenty. I've traveled, studied, experienced loss and fear and joy. I know what I'm saying no to. She squeezed his hand. I'm not asking you to turn me tomorrow. I'm asking you to stop treating this like it has an expiration date. I'm asking you to consider that maybe eventually, when I'm ready, you'll give me the same gift you were given. Gift? Felicity. Becoming a vampire means watching everyone you love die. It means blood and darkness and immortality that sometimes feels like a curse. It also means having time. Time to learn everything, see everything, be with the person I love for more than a handful of decades. She brought his hand to her face. You're so busy protecting me from vampirism that you're not seeing what the alternative means. I'll grow old, I'll die, and you'll be alone again for centuries while I'm gone. He pulled her into his arms, holding tight. I can endure that if it means you get to live fully. But what if I don't want you to endure it? What if I want us both to live fully together? She pulled back to meet his eyes. I'm not asking for forever right now. I'm asking for the possibility of it. Can you give me that? Vladimir searched her face for a long moment. Finally, slowly, he nodded. When you're 30, if you still want this, if you're certain, ask me again when you're 30. That gives you 7 years to be sure. 7 years, she agreed. And then we have forever. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. Felicity kissed him back, tasting possibility and promise. Those 7 years passed in a blur of happiness Felicity had never imagined. She enrolled in university, finishing her degree in history while working part-time helping organize the castle's archives. She published her father's research with Vladimir's help, crediting him posthumously for discoveries that advanced vampire-human relations significantly. She became a fixture at council meetings, offering a human perspective that many vampires found valuable. Lady Elisabetta took a particular liking to her, often inviting her for private discussions about politics and history. Vasil became like family, a brother who teased her about Vladimir's overprotective tendencies and taught her vampire history from a personal perspective. He'd found purpose helping other vampires who'd been imprisoned or abused, using his experience to advocate for reform. And through it all, Vladimir was her constant. He supported her dreams, challenged her thinking, made her laugh, and loved her with an intensity that sometimes took her breath away. They had fights, of course, about her safety, about his tendency to make decisions for her, about the stress of balancing human and vampire worlds. But they always worked through it, their bond growing stronger with each challenge. On her 30th birthday, Vladimir took her to the castle's highest tower at sunset. Prague spread below them, the city bathed in golden light. 7 years, he said quietly. You've lived, grown, accomplished so much. You could keep going, Felicity. You could have decades more of daylight and human experiences. I could, she agreed. Or I could have centuries of experiences I can't even imagine yet. With you. You're certain? Absolutely certain? I've never been more certain of anything. She turned to face him fully. I love you. I love this life. I want forever, Vladimir. With you. He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a ring ancient beautiful, with a red stone that caught the dying light. This belonged to my mother. It's been in my family for 600 years. I want you to have it, whether you choose mortality or immortality. But if you're truly ready, I'm ready. The turning happened that night, in his chambers with Vasil present as witness. It was intimate, painful, transcendent. Vladimir held her through the transformation, his blood mingling with hers, his voice steady as he talked her through each stage. When she woke 3 days later, the world had changed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, everything intensified. But most importantly, when she looked at Vladimir, she no longer felt the ticking clock of human mortality. She felt time stretching ahead, infinite and full of possibility. How do you feel? He asked softly, brushing hair from her face. Like I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be. She smiled, feeling her new fangs. Like we have forever, and I can't wait to spend it with you. He kissed her, gentle and reverent. Forever then. I can work with forever. They were married a month later in a ceremony that blended vampire tradition with human customs. The castle was filled with guests from both worlds, vampire nobility and human researchers, council members and university professors, all gathered to celebrate a union that represented hope for better understanding between species. Vasil stood as best man, tears in his eyes as he watched his brother pledge eternal love. Lady Elisabetta officiated, her voice ringing through the hall as she declared them bound by blood and choice. As they danced at the reception, Felicity looked around at the life they'd built, the household that had become family, the friends from both worlds, the future full of possibility. What are you thinking? Vladimir asked, holding her close. That my father would be proud. He spent his life trying to bridge the gap between humans and vampires. In a way, we're doing that, she smiled up at him. Also that I'm really glad the servants no longer think I'm a ghost. He laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I knew who you really were from the beginning. And what was that? My future, my heart, the person who'd make eternity worth living. He kissed her forehead. I love you, Felicity Drăculești. I love you too. She stood on her toes, still getting used to her new vampire grace, and kissed him properly. Forever. Around them, the celebration continued late into the night. Vampires and humans mingling, sharing stories and laughter, building bridges one conversation at a time. The castle that had once hidden secrets and harbored ghosts was now filled with light and hope. And in the center of it all, a vampire king and his newly immortal queen danced together. Their love story, proof that even the darkest pasts could lead to the brightest futures. That trust could be earned, wounds could heal, and love could transcend the boundaries between worlds. Years later, when historians wrote about this era, they would mark it as a turning point, the moment vampire-human relations shifted toward cooperation and understanding. They would credit political reform, progressive councils, and changing times. But those who were there knew the truth. It started with a girl hiding in a castle, a vampire king who chose justice over power, and a love that refused to be bound by the limitations of mortality. It started with Felicity Laurent, whom servants swore was the castle's ghost, but whom Vladimír Drăculești knew was exactly who she really was. His salvation, his partner, his eternal love. And they lived, truly lived, through centuries of sunsets and starlight, of challenges overcome and joys celebrated, together in the forever they'd chosen. The castle stood as it always had, ancient and proud, but now it was filled with warmth and laughter, a testament to the power of love to transform even the darkest places into home. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the politics or the power, not the immortality or the ancient bloodlines. Just two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to build a life filled with light. Just a king who learned that loving someone was worth more than any throne, and a woman who proved that bravery came in many forms, including choosing to live when running would have been easier. Their story became legend among both vampires and humans who knew the truth. A reminder that love could bridge any divide, heal any wound, and create possibilities where once there had been only fear and separation. And whenever young vampires asked how to find their own happiness in an immortal existence, the answer was always the same. Be open to the unexpected. Choose justice over convenience. And never, ever underestimate the courage of those who seem most vulnerable. Because sometimes the person hiding in the shadows isn't a ghost at all. Sometimes they're exactly what you've been searching for through centuries of loneliness, their home.